Harry, how are you?
I'm doing all right. It's 2025. New York is not on fire, so I'm trying to have some perspective.
Harry, let's go right in. What'd you make of the story this morning that former Governor Andrew Cuomo has hired Charlie King or is talking to Charlie King? I heard a rumor that Kevin Elkins from the Carpenters is hired as a campaign manager or is being considered. Just being, this is all rumors and speculation. I'll believe it when I read it and see it. What do you make of that?
Exactly where we were already at in this frozen moment when it's January, right? Eric Adams' trial is starting in April. The primary is in June. Like, time is getting short, but Cuomo has been floating. I could run. I would win if I run. All this stuff for some time. He's burning up phones. He's talking to people. He has all this campaign money from, when he resigned. He says now he was forced out. He resigned as governor. And he does not want to foreclose this option. At the same time, while he wants to be back in the game, he'd like to be the guy. He'd like there to be a city in crisis thing. He'd like there to not be a black centrist who he's in alignment with, even with ranked choice voting. Shout out Carol McCall. Shout out David Patterson. He's got some history on those terms. But Cuomo goes on about how the city is a creature of the state. He's been governor. He doesn't want to go up to Albany, even if he could win and get back in the game. He's got one shot to do that and be asking them for stuff. He doesn't want to foreclose on that if this is his option and his puncher's chance. So he's spending money. He's keeping himself out there. He's keeping a drumbeat of stories about him, even as he's not in the race. But none of that means that he's necessarily going in the race. And it means we don't know with the Democratic primary, with the general election in November, and again with Eric Adams' trial, what exactly we're talking about, who the candidates are, what the alternatives are. And it's going to be the first competitive ranked choice primary. It's going to be one of the first competitive primaries against a sitting Democratic mayor in a long time. And the first competitive ranked choice one on those terms. We don't know who the field is within the Democrats. We don't know if there's going to be a real and compelling general. Things are very strange and uncertain. And Cuomo wants to keep Reggie Jackson said,
stirring the pot.
Yes.
I'm the straw that just stirs the drink.
Exactly.
Reggie Jackson.
So Andrew Cuomo wants to stir the drink right now. He wants to be in the mix, but I don't know if he exactly wants to be mayor, and he's considering what his options are without foreclosing those, and that means he's got to stay there. He's got to be in people's heads, and he's got to be showing up in the papers. And by the way, the other thing that just happened with Cuomo is you had this new report out of Washington showing, in essence, that the Trump administration, had a weaponized investigation about some of the COVID nursing stuff, and they're treating this as we've been redeemed, and our response was so great, and in fact, it was, the Trump people, unsurprisingly, were playing politics with public health and governance. That does not mean that the Cuomo people were not doing their own similar things. And what Cuomo would come in with a lot of cash and a lot of name recognition, there would be serious organized forces against him. And I do think it would be nice to have somebody at the top of this field who is not mired in decades-old exhausting stuff, sort of ongoing scandals and fights. And we don't have that at the moment with Cuomo, with Eric Adams, with the challengers. Scott Stringer has his own baggage that he was running in part because he thinks this was unfair, and he might be right, but it's something voters are going to have to reckon with. It's sort of an exhausting set of dudes who are sort of in this mix.
Harry, you were getting bumped around there for a while by the NYPD and some of the folks in there. You were getting a little knocked up there. They even gave you a nickname. They were name calling and going after you. It was an attack, a social media attack. But one of the things you wrote in one of your pieces was about ultimately the numbers, the crime numbers, and what that means. You were looking ahead, separate of that. The numbers came out. There was a press conference on Monday. What do you make of them?
First off, I was getting some very aggressive incoming from some of the NYPD leadership, and then the mayor saying, "I understand where these fellas are coming from." I didn't feel very knocked around. I felt like they were sort of having a tantrum in a public one, and that was embarrassing for them, and that was that. And I'm like, I'll just keep doing my thing. These guys, John Chell is now the chief of department, so the top uniformed official, chief of patrol at the time. He was booking TV appearances to talk about me, and I thought that was sort of absurd and embarrassing.
But that's also a compliment.
I guess.
That means they're reading. And they're paying attention.
Yeah. So the new numbers show that crime is down this year from last year in a bunch of categories, although not all of them. It's up. There's been an increase in felony assaults, and at least on paper, and the new commissioner, Jessica Tisch, had an explanation about this with rape, and she's arguing this has to do with how things are categorized rather than what's actually happening, right? Which is always complicated with statistics. What I'm saying is, Eric Adams is pivoting into full re-election mode. He has a brand new police commissioner. This is his fourth police commissioner in 3 years. She is, from a very affluent family. She's a very impressive manager. She has a sort of independence. This is really useful for Adams after the mess he's made of the department. He's an ex-cop, of course. 22 years strapping on a bulletproof vest. He was a data analyst. And here we are. And this is the latest reboot to say we're making it safe. And you can feel all the stuff that's sort of getting repeated. We're going to be sending more police into the trains. Like, haven't we been hearing about that for years? And then what's different? Tish is explaining, well, they're not just going to be standing by the entrances, which is largely what's been happening. They're going to be on the platforms and in the subway cars. And then Adams, because he has to say, everything I've done has always been good. Crime has always been down on my watch. This is his signature issue. Look, the man became mayor by saying he knew how to do public safety the right way. New Yorkers don't feel that way. They feel considerably less safe than before the pandemic by pretty much every measurement. The crime numbers are considerably up since before the pandemic by pretty much every measurement, which doesn't mean everything is wildly out of control necessarily. But he keeps choosing baseline years that he can just say the word down. You need jobs up, crime down. Up from what, how much, down from what, how much. He doesn't really want to get into any of that. So it's always, someone in Albany is stopping me from doing this. My people are doing everything as wonderfully and perfectly. We have a good new commissioner, and you can have confidence now, but also things were great the whole time I've been here and under the previous commissioner. So this is all a series of rhetorical show games, and Tish, who comes in with some real credit. She's got Brad and Kelly, like former commissioners with real credentials, vouching for her. She did a very good job at sanitation. She does have a sort of independence. She has cleared some house, although some of these characters are still around. And,
What do you attribute that to?
To potentially, and this is the open question, who's really running the police department? And we're 3 commissioners in to that being Eric Adams. And with the 4th commissioner, again, she comes in with some real credit of a different sort. Maybe she's going to have real control. But if John Cho is the new chief of department, Jeffrey Madry's out, not because Tish pushed him out, but because this sex for overtime scandal came out with this guy with a long history of bad stuff with women and abusing his authority, who Adams has gone to bat for again and again. She did not clear him. So the question is Adams still running this? Do New Yorkers feel good about that? The answer to the first is maybe. The answer to the second is definitely no. They don't feel good about public safety. And this isn't just high-profile incidents, but there's a reason those incidents keep happening. And every time, it's 1 in a million. Okay, we're down to, on the trains, it's 1.5 million now. You have that, more bad, nightmarish things are going to occur. And trying to say each time, this is just psychology, this is just in your head, the numbers prove everything is good, is insulting New Yorkers' intelligence. So Adams has a short period of time to clean that up, but he's kept the whole center of the field to himself. Andrew Cuomo doesn't want to get in if he's there. You have a Democratic primary where he wants to argue it's me or the left, and he wants to smush all the other people running into the left. And by the way, we just had an election, right, where we got Eric Adams. People were talking about we could have had Maya Wiley, like progressives. Maya Wiley finished 3rd. It was Eric Adams, who narrowly edged out, surprisingly narrowly, 40,000 votes or something, Catherine Garcia. And so if Adams is saying, I'm the one person with some public safety plan, even if you don't love how it's going, just consider the alternatives. New Yorkers are thinking about these scary stories, people getting lit on fire, shoved in front of trains. They're thinking about street protests that seem really like disruptive and complicated. You don't even have to love the policing part of this to be like, this is chaotic and not great. Adams has had a mixed approach to those. But if the option is him or a bunch of people who want to do like the wink and nod, absolutely take over the Brooklyn Bridge, occupy the Columbia buildings, whatever it may be. Like, yeah, he's got a real lane there, and he just needs to not have openly dirty, corrupt people around him, which has been a struggle for him because he likes a lot of those people. Those are his boys, and his boys, man, this is pretty gendered. And then he's like, look, but I got competent women who are nominally running things. While his boys are running around, deciding on promotions, handling those sorts of things. And that's where we are. It's a very strange and frozen moment. No one should be writing the current mayor off, but he's put himself in a difficult position, largely of his own making, because he just messed around and wanted to show I can keep dancing through the raindrops. That's how he'd made his career, going back to 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement and when he was a Gadfly cop. And he thinks he can keep doing it, but it's not so easy. Even Al Sharpton is straight up saying he's got a hill to climb like none he's climbed before in his career. And those guys known each other a long time.
Harry, what do you rate your relationship currently with the NYPD as a member of the press since the changes? Has it gotten better? Meaning from the days of them actively coming after you and not that it matters, but it did. I don't see it anymore. I don't see the attacks. Has it gotten better?
Oh, clear. Like what happened was so weird and anomalous. And there was this dude, Tariq Shepard, who'd been a precinct commander who came in as DCPI, the Deputy Commissioner for Public Information, which is a fancy title for press secretary, but is a commissioner. Commissioners are not supposed to be the civilians carrying guns, doing the law enforcement. That's not their job. This guy, he was showing up at that Columbia raid, riding on the back of like a military type vehicle as they were going to go into the hall to clear out the students. Showing up and stuff like that. They were doing videos of themselves after clearing the press, hoisting the American flag. I got no issue with hoisting the American flag. The NYPD should not be shooting its own video of them doing it and then, circulating that. Like weird stuff. And this guy was flipping out on reporters. He told a reporter, a good one, from the New York Post, who was doing just a straight up, I'm doing my reporting call, go fuck yourself. Now, that's bizarre and a little out of control. It's another friend of Eric's. He's been moved out. There seem to be competent people moving in and buttoning up and just having that basic, they've got rid of the slogan, but professionalism, courtesy, professionalism, respect is a good starting point. The real questions are, is the NYPD going to be open about its numbers? Are they going to have monthly CompStat briefings again? Not an end of year one where Adams is there and the commissioner's there and they're answering a few questions, but it's mostly their framing. They used to do every month. Here are the CompStat numbers. Here are the police reporters who are the representatives of the public in this sense who know something, digging into those numbers and asking questions. Why is this up here? What's happening in this precinct? It was almost like a public-facing CompStat where you simply had to account for what was happening. That's all gone away. They do pressers when there's good news. When Eric Adams could say, crime is down, whatever that means, and I did it. And so not cursing out reporters or starting unnecessary feuds or having, John Chell beefing with politicians, publicly on his Twitter feed, that's great. It's minimal, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I do think that they want to restore some professionalism and give people confidence in policing again. Which most people want more public safety, are not adversarially against the police. But when the police have tantrums and act ridiculously in public-facing ways again and again on this guy's watch, people start saying, what's up with that?
Harry,
and why should we take what you say seriously?
Now that the left has sort of, for the most part, defund, right, repudiated money or rolled back taking money from real estate, now that's not cool anymore. They're reading the tea leaves. Mm-hmm. What do you make of the other folks running? Brad Lander, Michael Blake, Jessica Ramos, Zellner Myrie, Jim Walden, Scott Stringer. Do you think anyone there can put it together in the climate of we don't want left?
I think.
Is anyone impressing you?
No, but no one's trying to exactly. People are thinking about how no one's paying that much attention. They need to raise money and develop institutional support. And the idea is to do those things, to have an election that's a referendum against an historically unpopular mayor with a criminal trial, an historic criminal trial. Never had one of those for a sitting mayor before coming up, and break through late with something that's compelling, does not push off the 40% or so of the Democratic primary electorate that is the left, but allows them to open up to other people. So a lot of these candidates think they can be that person. They have their own theories about it. You didn't mention Zoran Mandami, right, who's a member of the DSA, who raised a lot of money and got some buzz right when he came in, and is like a very talented young performer. Like, he reminds me in some ways, he's filling the lane Morales filled last time, but he seems better informed and more competent, and like he's not going to blow himself up like she ended up doing. She had great posters and a lot of buzz for that reason without knowing very much and without running a very competent campaign, bluntly. But this guy is a member of the DSA. The DSA members, their electeds, they all meet actually with party leadership. They're socialists, so they probably don't say the word leadership, but whatever it is, all the time to talk about what they're doing and how it fits with that agenda. So that him being in the race makes it harder for the other people to drift or sort of squint or be like, don't worry, once I'm there, I'm going to have these things in my agenda. For the other leftists, as I would define them, who are there. That said, like, look, Scott Stringer was a competent controller. He's a state senator for a long time before that. He's a very political guy, but he's somebody with some base of support and understanding. So maybe Brad Lander, was a very competent council member.
And Brad's been able to appeal some of the DSA folks from Zoran.
Mm-hmm. But he needs also to move to the less ideological Democrats, what the Post always calls, sometimes accurately, often not, like common sense Democrats. People who are not thinking about this all the time, who are deeply plugged in, who but are going to show up and vote in this primary, and then in the general if that's competitive. So maybe for a whole bunch of them in different ways, there's a lane. Walden, who's suing to restore the Independence Party, which is a whole can of worms, because wants to run.
And suing Elon Musk now. Mm-hmm. And he's suing Elon Musk.
That's right. That's right. He's been all over the place in sort of interesting ways for the tiny handful of people who are paying attention. Hasn't broken through, but all of them are hoping, like Bill de Blasio, he was running fourth in that Democratic primary. 6 weeks out from the election. And that despite John Liu having not got, shout out to Eric Adams, his matching funds for a scandal in which his treasurer ended up going to prison briefly, but he was never charged. But that meant that Bill de Blasio had a double wide lane on the left. There was no ranked choice at this point. And a whole bunch of stuff happened. He used outside money to sort of damage Christine Quinn, who was the presumed frontrunner. Anthony Weiner happened again. It was a whole thing. And much confusion. Bill Thompson was there, who people took too seriously because he'd been very competitive, much more so than the common sense, I put that in quotes, it suggested in 2009, when the Bloomberg campaign spent all this dough, knowing he wasn't very popular, Bloomberg, to be like, this isn't a race, don't pay attention. And Thompson ends up coming much closer than people expect. He runs again. But Thompson is like a classic establishment replacement level guy. My point here is a whole bunch of confusing stuff no one remembers or cares about happens. And, now Bill de Blasio and 250,000 votes in the Democratic primary, is mayor. What it takes to win power in a city of still, even after COVID, 8.5 million people, big place, is not that much if this is getting decided there. Now it's ranked choice, but it's crowded, it's complicated. We don't know what the actual contest is going to be. Is it the primary? Is it the general, which is not ranked choice, because nothing in New York is coherent or makes sense without having to explain it too much. We just don't know. And a lot of very smart, very ambitious people are like, I'm going to take my shot. And if they don't hit it, they're going to look like schnooks and suckers and we'll go, ha-ha. But they have a case to make for why they could be the person. Zellner Myrie is like a very smart, very competent young state senator who's managed to do a lot there, which is not easy as a lawmaker where everything's the will of the caucus and this and that, and who beat an Adams protege to win his seat in the first place. He gets packed in with the lefties, and him, like a bunch of these guys, wants to be like, no, I'm actually pretty sensible. I can maintain public safety. I can do all these things. And when he says it, it's pretty smart and compelling. The problem is he's never been an executive or run something big. He hasn't been around for so long that everyone knows who he is. And so filling all that in and making this credible so it's more than sound bites in different ways is the challenge for each of these guys, as it is for almost everyone who runs for mayor. Because there's not some other really powerful position where what you do matters the same way inside New York. And that includes controller, right? A lot of which is actually you're just managing pension funds and making yourself sound like the important money person. Yeah. You do have some real powers, but...
Yeah, you have some auditing power. The example of Brad, he's been able to use to some extent, right, the auditing and the looking at contracting and getting some news out of it.
Yeah, some news out of it is the thing. I actually think Scott, who's very political, was a more effective person in that office. I think Brad, he's constantly like, how can I get news out of this? How is this going to help me when I'm thinking about running for mayor? And he was thinking about not this cycle, but the next one initially. Because generally, people talk about primarying the Democratic incumbent and then they don't. And Adams is so weak that all these people say, okay, we got to do it now. And given how unpopular he is, given that there's ranked choice, that people can smush all these lefties together, and then if one of them is not a lefty and appeals to, quote, ordinary Democrats or New Yorkers, they see a lane. Is that real? Like, we're going to find out.
Harry, what do you make of the only woman and the arguably Latina? Because of Zellner's surname, it's very difficult, and the fact that I don't believe he speaks Spanish. But Ramos is labor chair, woman, Latina, the only, arguably. Meaning people are going to look at the ballot, right? Someone like my mother, right, who's going to say Ramos. My mother still talks about Herman Badillo, by the way.
Yeah.
She's 86.
Yeah.
Meaning the sort of connection.
So Ramos, who's also young, state lawmaker, very smart, very impressive in a bunch of ways, pretty ideological, right? She helped blow up some. We'll see because we don't have winners yet. But she made it much harder for Steve Cohen's casino plan, which was impressive. And like lots of politicians suggest they're going to do that, and then the money and the incentives are so much, and like, hey, this probably isn't going to happen anyways. We should get while the getting's good. And she stood up for that, and that was a moment where she
didn't blink.
Stood out.
She didn't blink.
She's like a really interesting person. She actually started off, working for Hiram Montserrat.
Oh, I know.
Who has his own history and history with the mayor, and is still a character in Queens who's desperate to return to elected office. Like one of those people like Anthony Weiner who's running, who just doesn't know what else to do with himself. Another former cop, by the way. Montserrat, not Weiner. But Ramos is serious and impressive. The New York editorial board I'm part of that's interviewing candidates is meeting with her tomorrow. And Brad Lander was the first candidate we met with, and we're just going to be asking her questions and trying to get things on the record and doing this now and putting candidates through their paces. I am not in any sense writing her off. She also has a theory and a path, and it is striking that she's the only woman in the race. And when you're thinking about, and again, with ranked choice, like people want to vote for people they identify with. So you have like a Spanish-speaking Hispanic woman from Queens, of Queens,
with a press and comms background too.
Yeah, and labor ties, and I absolutely see the case for her, as with many of these people on paper. I understand why they're willing to run, and they're willing to start off at 0.5% or 2% in the polls, and they think they can introduce themselves and break through. One of them may end up as an historical figure there, and a lot of the rest of them are going to be figuring out what they're doing. By the way, both Ramos and Myrie, if they don't win, they still have their jobs because the state cycle is different. So Brad Lander, assuming he's running for mayor, he doesn't go back into the controller race, and he kept that option open. He says it was a paperwork thing, like, come on, right? Of course you keep your options open. All these folks, that's what they do. But Ramos and Myrie, this is a free roll for them that way, and Zoran. If this doesn't happen, they just go back to their jobs, something ventured and nothing lost. And the worst thing is that they have a good campaign apparatus. They get to spread some money around. They increase their name recognition. It becomes, in a sense, a free roll.
Harry, what do you make of, right, so Andrew Cuomo conceivably, more and more talk of him potentially running for mayor. That also helps Governor Hochul, because if he's focused on the city to some extent, maybe.
Hochul is.
There's Richie Torres now, who's taken a posture of like every day. I mean, not a day goes by where he's not going on a vociferous attack of everything the governor does and says.
And everything
right?
that happens
The Delgado thing, I don't think was by coincidence, right?
No.
Then Michael Lawler.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have someone who, like former Governor Cuomo, who he's the modern day version of the Terminator, right? When he focuses on something, he doesn't let it go.
The first Terminator,
he's like a dog on a bone.
T2 is awesome, but the first Terminator is just a horror movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger stalking Linda Hamilton. That's the whole thing, and he just don't stop.
But, former governor's a tough person.
Yeah.
He's relentless.
Vendetta.
So maybe in a way, this is good. But what does this all mean? Congestion pricing is taking all the oxygen out of the room on the affordability stuff that she's announcing, right? Mm-hmm. That's my sense, meaning she's saying all these great things and doing all these great things around pocketbook issues, but everyone keeps pointing, but I'm paying $9, to come into the city. I'm a firefighter. I'm a police officer. So it's sort of canceling out some of these announcements, but maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
Hochul, Lee Zeldin came much closer than a very Trumpy Republican would have against a stronger Democratic governor. Like, Hochul feels very weak. Jumaane Williams ran against her last time around, and that proved not to be, for a number of reasons, a very significant challenge. And with leaving that aside, the people who are looking to step up against her, the Democrats, and then the Republican, she's going to have a real race in her hands. She is very unpopular. She is less popular than Trump in New York State. She's not much more popular in the city. She's there somewhat accidentally. She doesn't get credit for a lot of the good things she's done, and often doesn't seem to be trying to. And I'd use congestion pricing as an example of that. It's such, to use a traffic metaphor, like middle of the road roadkill. Like, you did this, you paused it, you made it less, and then said, I'm saving you money on the new toll, I'm making you pay. And now, as there are these very positive early signs, that despite what you might read in the Post, which has gone in full crusade mode here, there appears to be, it's very early, a lot less traffic in Manhattan. People have not lost their minds. I don't think that this is broken. I think in some ways this was needed to replace the commuter tax that Shelley Silver killed, to talk about some old history. And the MTA...
I was over an assembly seat upstate or something.
Yeah. It was just sort of an accidental casualty, and it was this huge revenue stream for New York that balanced a lot of stuff out until it just went away. But, Hochul is very weak. She knows it. She just passed this giant historic thing that was decades in the making, many, many years, depending how you count, and doesn't really want to claim... She sees the polling, right? She's not stupid. Credit for it, but there's just sort of a vacuum there at a time when people don't feel great about the state of the city or the state, and I don't think just sort of the default of being the Democrat who's presently in power is going to be enough to see her through. I think Torres, who's very smart and ambitious and excessively online.
But here's what I would say: all of that is true. Do you think it's too much?
What is
okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And you're a reporter. You're a member of the press. Facts. After a while, when someone calls you constantly and sends you stuff constantly about something they dislike or someone they dislike, after a while, don't you tune them out? Say, okay, I heard you the first time. This is beginning to look a little obsessive, or it is too much. Or pick your battles, or take your foot off the gas a bit.
Maybe.
Or do you think the strategy that he's playing now makes it more like, hey, it's like a sort of crescendo, and he's building momentum, and more people are paying attention?
I think it's closer to the second. I think the things we're hearing for the thousandth time, each time he says it, a lot of people
becomes
hear
a tree falling in the forest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that could backfire.
Yeah. These are all complicated gambles, but look, Torres was one of the most effective council members we've ever had. The handful of people actually figured out how to use that weak legislative body who were not speakers or leaders, and I'm going to get a committee chair, I'm going to do something with it. Really impressive.
He was tough on NYCHA.
Very tough on NYCHA, and to significant, to the benefit of NYCHA residents over time. He really called out the authority on what the obligations it was not living up to. He then won a congressional seat in a very crowded, very messy race where that was no sure thing. He's very ambitious, very tightly coiled, and sees a disconnect between the narrative that the governor and the mayor, who are in a real alignment, are offering.
And he can raise money.
And he can raise money. He sees an opportunity. The lieutenant governor, who's like an impressive, ambitious guy who, like many lieutenant governors, is like, what is this? What am I doing here? He sees an opening. And New York, by the way, elects the governor and the lieutenant governor separately, which is its own weird thing. Running in New York is insanely expensive. It's a gigantic state. Just traveling across it, like campaigning in different counties, the media markets, it's a big thing to do. And like generating that in a primary, like just the support you need, the institutional support, the financial support against a sitting governor is a big lift. But Hochul seems very weak, and there's a reason people are eyeing this. And of course, back to Cuomo, I do think that there's a good chance that he ends up in and upset some of the dynamics in that race. I think he was literally raised in captivity in the governor's mansion. He knows that world. He feels a tremendous sense of unfinished business. He's sitting around fuming, and we'll see where all this goes. I don't know. But it's going to be a very interesting year, and how this year's election plays out in New York City will do a lot to set the stage for how the politics play out around New York State in 2026.
If you were, let's just hypothetically advising some of these folks, would you advise? I mean, if let's say conceivably, I think it's behooves Governor Hochul to sort of, and they have a very good working relationship, governor mayor, to work together on in sort of anti-Cuomo lane, and sort of pile on.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that to me, that's a smart strategy. Keep them out.
It's going to be interesting if Andrew Cuomo does not enter this race, how aggressively Eric Adams, if he's still around and mayor and all that, wants to return the favor next year. Like, you can feel the extent to which everybody needs things from everyone else. The governor and the mayor have both really benefited by being on the same page. And that's a funny thing to say when one of them is historically unpopular and the other is only very unpopular, right? But like what remains of their support has a lot to do with the ways they've bound themselves to each other. So when Adams was doing this presser, being like, crime's down, everything's great, it's the new commissioner, so don't worry about the old scandals, is wonderful, but also it was great previously, and we were always doing a great job. And they announced this latest, we're going to have more cops in the subways soon. And reporters, obviously are like, what's different? You've been announcing this for years, and it keeps happening, and people are still afraid. And Tish says, well, they're going to go down I mentioned this before, I think. They're going to go down, and they're not just going to be right by the entrances. And then Adams says, no. It was working wonderfully when they were just by the entrances. And the reason why he has to say that is, one, because he has to say everything Eric Adams has always done has been good. But two, because Hochul has put money into that, in addition to sending the state troopers down. And even with the massive overtime stuff, most of which is not going to sex for powerful officers, even if some of it evidently was, right? You're worried about how much all this costs, and the governor's been putting money in because she knows that if that breaks down, that's really damaging to her. It's politically fatal to the mayor, and they've spent a ton to make people not feel worse. They haven't done a great job of making it feel better, but that does play some role, and he has to never blindside the governor on that stuff or put her in a bad corner. You can feel the alignment. So when Tish is saying the very practical thing, the way these cops have been deployed hasn't worked, that comes off as the thing Hochul has helped support didn't work as a political answer, and that's why Adams has to intervene there. And they were both cautious about it. But listen, when you're on a podium with one other person, and the two of you, as Tish, Commissioner Tish, and Mayor Adams now are bound to each other. Like, your success is tied up in the other one doing well and restoring public safety and public confidence in public safety, right? And you have to correct the other one. That shows all of the deals you made, the other people you're tied to, and what you can and can't say. And that was like a sort of quietly dramatic example of it. But Hochul desperately needs Adams. She needs to do super well in New York City to have a shot, and she needs to not have any erosion in her support with like black homeowners in Queens, for instance, with like real parts of Adams' base. And Adams, who's he was like, I'm a state senator, I'm going to get whatever I want from Albany, has been pummeled by Albany. Like, they really embarrassed him. They gave him like a 2-year mayoral extension, so he's going to have to go back and beg again before running for re-election, which was the last thing he's wanted. He's talking about how for 2 years I've asked for reform on recidivism. Like, first off, no one knows what reform he's talking about. He just kept bringing it up and kept going around circles with reporters. Recidivism's the problem, not bail reforms. He lost that fight. So now he's reframing this. He's saying there's a thing, but there's not even a thing. Like, he needs so much help from Albany. The city is a creature of the state. And he's got a rough relationship with the legislature. He needs the governor badly, and the governor needs him. So there they are, sort of stuck to each other, and they may well end up drowning together. We'll see.
All right, let's go down the ballot. What handicap the comptroller's race, the city comptroller's race? It's a stepping stone to bigger and better things.
So right now, there's 4 candidates in there, and it's very likely going to be, and you don't even have to know the people to know what's up, the Manhattan Borough president, and if it's not, it's very likely to be the council member from Brooklyn, who's like sort of the backup option there, both white guys.
So you're saying the leader right now is Mark Levine?
I am. I am. That all shifts, of course, if Brad Lander, who is the sitting controller, ends up back in that race. And then it's like a reverse dominoes or musical chairs or whatever, where these guys got to scramble. I believe Levine can just run for re-election at that point, furthering the reverse dominoes or musical chairs. But Brannon, who's term limited, the Brooklyn council member, would then be in a tough position. And you want to pay attention to all these races, controller, borough president, all this stuff. Again, not because it's so important who's there in what are essentially administrative for controller in a lot of ways, or just officious for the borough president's jobs, where ceremonial and it sounds real important. It's useful for getting bribes from other sorts of folks because you sound real powerful to people who don't know nothing, right? Mr. President. But because these are all stepping stones for potential mayors, as we saw with former borough president Eric Adams. Outside of that, and the stakes being very high for the people with future ambitions and who want to have a staff and a driver and all those things, on some level, it doesn't matter who's there. Like, New York is always about to go to hell. We never quite get there. And we never quite get there more in spite of than because of.
We're not going there ever, by the way. I want to put that say that. No, everyone wants to be in New York, right? I agree with the mayor wholeheartedly. Those that are not from here wish they were. They were from. Everyone wants to be here. Yeah. This is where it's at.
I'm totally with the mayor.
I want to put a stamp on it. But go ahead, Harry.
No, I'm 100% with you. Where I'm not with the mayor on that is when he was doing the back to Ohio thing. Because New York is a city full of people from Ohio and Sri Lanka and wherever. And you and I both grew up here, and that's awesome. I've lived here my whole life. I'm raising my kids here. But like this is a transit city. It's a port city. It's a place for people to come through, and that's beautiful. And if that didn't happen, it's like when the trains don't work. At a certain point, that would be a heart attack for New York. It's not just for us who was always here. God bless us, but it's for all the people who come in, make lives here, or make little marks here, and then move out and have other things, and that's beautiful too.
Harry, let's wrap this up. Biggest winner, 2024, biggest loser. No Trump. I keep Trump. Everyone says Trump is the winner. No, you're not going to get that one, all right? Trump is out.
So we do this for New York or nationally? It's got Trump.
New York State, city. Let's keep it local. Biggest winner.
I'm hoping the biggest winner in 2025 is going to be voters and democracy.
No. Who was the biggest winner last year? City and state. Or you could have two.
Oh, man. I feel like this is teed up. I'm swinging above it and below it. Eric Adams is a big winner for not being completely politically dead. for holding his position. He keeps saying no one's going to outrun me, and he's not kidding. This is a man who knows how to campaign,
he's resilient,
make his case, who busts ass, who shows up everywhere, who takes hits and keeps going. Again, I think he's in a very weak spot, but that he's in that spot and he's held on to it while getting buffeted is in its own way.
He's got all the union. He's got all the labor.
Labor is the quiet.
But he's got all the labor. He's got all the institutional support, and he's the moderate.
Yeah, that's a powerful position, and I think he is not in a strong position, but is severely underpriced right now in much of the discourse. So I'm going to put him as a winner. He's got a trial coming up. He's got more political trials to face. We'll see how that holds up.
Biggest loser.
Wow. My brain is just going short on this. Who really got pummeled this year? I think the NYPD, suffered tremendous damage in having so many scandals that people can't tell them apart. And like, which sex scandal involving a top cop closely tied to Eric Adams was this? So, we had 3 resignations. There was the one who was investigated by the FBI 10 years ago for taking bribes from guys who were also bribing the last mayor and bribing other top cops with hookers and flying them around and taking them to dinners. There was the guy who ran a shadowy agency and was nominally a civilian, but was flashing a badge like it was a shield and then putting his hands around the neck of a shelter worker who wasn't fast enough to respect his authority, who got pushed out with Adams insisting the city cover his legal defense because he was a hero. Finally got pushed out when he got sued by a subordinate who was a police officer who said he derailed her entire career when she wasn't interested in sleeping with him or taking a promotion as his personal driver, promotion, so they could have alone time, and also derailing her male supervisor's police officer's career, or the sex scandal involving the guy paying off subordinates for sex with overtime, who was the top uniformed official. Those are 3 separate scandals involving 3 close allies of Eric Adams. We're on our 4th commissioner in under 3 years. Totally unprecedented. And a lot of people who want public safety, who are just like real ordinaries, we're not thinking about this stuff all the time. Like defund just seems like a weird idea to them. Like, why would you do that? Not even politically. Just that doesn't make sense. Who's going to pay the police then, right? Have less confidence in the stuff that the police are representing about how safe things really are, about how good these conditions are, because they're noticing these scandals in the background and they can't tell Madry from Pearson from Banks. That's not their concern. They're just like, wait, what? This stuff keeps showing up, and I'm seeing, this guy with his pants down on the train, and I'm seeing this one sort of screaming stuff, and I'm being told that like everything is actually really good. Like someone's lying to me, and increasingly people think it's the police. Again, I've written this, I've said it. Just start talking about the numbers every month. If some of this is psychology, be straight with that. If you only talk about the numbers when they're good and you obscure them when you're bad, if you're cherry picking statistics and anecdotes, don't expect. Not me, not you, but like just regular folks, right, who are out like playing sports, commuting to work, getting their kids to school or whatever, to just take what you say seriously. Like police have a lot of earned and inherited like respect and for the hard work, for the authority, and for the efficiousness, the just the facts, ma'am stuff of what they're putting out. You start playing with those facts, and doing it again and again and again. And what you say and what people see don't match up, you've got a real problem, and it's one that's going to take some time to rebuild. And what's more, it's happening while the police department is historically small. Getting the credit to rebuild that, to be like, we need to put more resources in, you're spending against that every time you insist, but it's also all going great now, and the only problem is everyone else, and the lawmakers, and the this, and the that, and the DAs, but we're doing our thing. Are you?
Harry, predictions for 2025.
We'll know much more after 2024, of course. I think there's going to be a real Democratic primary for governor. I think there's going to be a real general election for governor. And I think that that there will be more interesting Senate and Assembly races in the state, though not necessarily in the city, than we're used to seeing. I think having Trump reelected is actually like the one piece of good news for local Democrats here when they're thinking about holding on to their own seats and positions, especially inside the city and the greater New York City area. That's going to make it harder for Republican and outside challengers, but we're going to see.
Predict the next city council speaker.
Nope, too soon. I know the city council speaker is a crazy thing because it's
an
behind
insider,
the scenes, totally insider thing, and it had been the county leaders. It still sort of is. They're weaker. All the institutional forces that used to make these deals are weaker, and you now have almost each time a 4-year speaker, which is its own thing. And the reason why is all the members are ambitious. And if you have a 4-year speaker, right, because it's 2-term limit, this gets complicated with redistricting every 10 years, but don't worry about that for a second, right? You want that to turn over because the members all want to be able to move their own bills to the floor, to handle their own stuff, to actually have some power. The speaker, by contrast, as in all legislative bodies, wants it to be will of the caucus. Discussions happen behind closed doors. There's a bottlenecking for deciding who gets the nice posts and the better staff and the fast track for getting their legislation through. And because the members vote on the speaker, because the proxies behind them, the county leaders and other forces that are meant to cluster them and thus decide that with the members just sort of as avatars are weaker and weaker, the individual members are like, we don't want a speaker. We want to speak. And that is a fundamentally interesting dynamic. It makes me wonder about the term limits, which I like in a lot of ways, because I see, I think the speaker right now has actually played her position very well and with real restraint, with a weak legislative body that is much weaker than the mayor in New York going back to 1990. And you realize like how little they can do against a powerful mayor who wants to effectively use that. And I think that dynamic is likely to get even rougher. So it's interesting because the council is a little to the left of the mayor. It used to be way to the left of the mayor. You mentioned defund, right? There was a progressive caucus that was like most of the council. Like Brad Lander was the powerful, prominent number 2 and guy who had a fair amount of control there. And there were all these interesting identity politics things about how powerful he was. If he was taking credit for other people's work or he was being undercredited because you couldn't have a white guy as the symbol of this, which is playing out again, by the way, as it's interesting. You have Brad Lander and Scott Stringer both running for mayor in this Bill de Blasio-ish sort of way. They do not have black sons. They do not have as compelling a case. And again, in a ranked choice system, people are not just tribal or ethnic or that's it. But like, hey, these guys are all sort of the same. Like, is that really the person people are going to put at the very top of their ballot? And that's a complicated and interesting challenge for them and the people running against them, like how that's going to work and what it is that's going to bring folks out. And when you don't exactly have to choose and how much those loyalties are going to play a role in, which, by the way, brings us back to Ramos, the only woman so far in this race, which is sort of remarkable given how many people are in.
Yeah. Harry, I want to thank you for your time. Anything you want to add to the conversation that I forgot to ask you?
So much of this is so deep in the weeds and doesn't really matter, right? And what really matters with this stuff, if you're not like directly eating off it or thinking about it, with all these characters and all the stuff they're saying, you can say a lot of stuff when you're running. What politics is how we're distributing our common resources and what are our common rules. And that obviously matters to anyone listening to a thing like this if you're 50 minutes in, you know? And if you can bottom line to that, are we safer? As the JB said, I'm paying taxes. What am I buying? That matters. All the rest of this is noise. Some of the noise can be very entertaining. These people are all professionally colorful and
interesting. It's like WWE.
No doubt.
It's just fun.
Yeah, Donald Trump goes way back with them. There's always been that overlap, but the question is, how much does the performance have to do with the practice?
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about baseball, for instance, is you have your characters, but you're beloved. We were talking before we went on about Manny being Manny, and
but you don't have characters anymore. It is, it's not a different world. You don't have the Billy Martins and these guys anymore. Can't get away with that anymore.
No.
Can't be Bobby Knight, Woody Hayes, those guys. That's an era bygone. Even Bill Parcells would have a rough going in today's day and age.
And a big part of that, by the way, is free agency and even the equivalents.
And this money ball. Whatever happened to throw the ball, hit the ball. Let's wrap here. Because we should do another segment on just sports in general. Let's wrap here. I went this weekend to check out professional bull riding. Just to check a box. Listen to this. Madison Square Garden. But listen to this. There was one guy who fell off a horse, had stitches, got all banged up, fell off a bull. Came back the following week and did it all over again. Yeah. Now you can't throw 100 pitches.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
Mets had a 4-man rotation, all on drugs.
Yeah.
And they were just fine. And they weighed 160, 70 pounds wet. And they played an entire season. And it was run, throw the ball, hit the ball. I don't know what happened to this watered-down mathematical mumbo-jumbo, but anyway, I can't. You're going to get me started, Harry. We're running out of time. We're out of time, and we got to do another segment on that alone because I have a lot to say. But either way, thank you, Harry. I appreciate you, and happy New Year to you and your family.
Brother, thank you. Happy New Year. Too much stats is bad.